Harlequin Audio is proud to bring you A Brother's Honor, The Grangers, Book 1, by Brenda Jackson. Performed by Ron Butler. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Honor one another above yourselves. Romans 12:10. Prologue. Foreman, has the jury reached a verdict? The judge asked in the still, quiet courtroom, packed to capacity. The trial of the state of Virginia versus Shepard Granger had lasted for 5 weeks, and the 8 men and 4 women had deliberated for 16 hours. Yes, we have, Your Honor. Will you hand the verdict form to the court, please? Within seconds, the bailiff presented the form to the judge, who took a moment to read the document before handing it in turn to the clerk who faced those in the courtroom. Shepard Granger showed no emotion as the clerk began reading what would be his fate. At one point, he was tempted to glance over his shoulder to look at his 3 young sons, Jace, 16, Caden, 14, and Dalton, who would be turning 12 in a few days. He hoped and prayed that, no matter what the jury decided, they would believe he was an innocent man. There was no way he would have killed the mother of his beloved sons. Instead, he listened as the clerk spoke the words, "Of the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Sylvia Granger, we, the jury, find Shepard Granger guilty." Shepard suddenly felt his knees weaken, but he refused to go down, and he refused to glance back at his sons. His father, Richard Granger, would know what to do now. Richard would now become responsible for his grandsons, and he would be there for them since Shepard would not. The judge was talking, addressing the court, but whatever he was saying, Shepard couldn't hear for the pounding in his head. As far as Shepard was concerned, nothing else mattered. Only one thought repeated itself in his head with blinding clarity. His life, as he'd once known it, was over. Part 1. We do not remember days. We remember moments. Anonymous. 1. 15 years later. Hoping it wasn't obvious that he was watching the time, Jace Granger took a sip of his wine and looked straight ahead at the huge clock hanging on the wall, directly above the entrance of the upscale Los Angeles restaurant. He'd been there for exactly 1 hour and 12 minutes, and was biting at the bit to call it a night. He appreciated his friend Alan Carter's concerns about his solitary life, but blind dates had never been Jace's thing, and he had known after the first 10 minutes that he'd made a mistake by letting Alan talk him into one tonight. No doubt Angela Farlow was a looker. He would give her that. But so far, it had been one hell of a night. For starters, she talked too damn much. She had a lot to say. A lot about practically nothing. Jace took another sip of his wine and listened, or at least pretended to do so. The last couple of times he had tried interjecting his own thoughts and views, she had unabashedly cut them down, letting him know what she thought of any opinions other than her own. Noticing a lull in the conversation, Jace shifted his gaze from the clock back to her and saw the sultry pout that touched her lips. "Why do I get the feeling that I'm boring you?" she asked in a low tone. "Because you are," he was tempted to say. But being the gentleman that he was, instead he said, "On the contrary, I happen to find you anything but boring," plastering a smile on his face. "In fact, I find you simply fascinating." Now, that wasn't a lie. He doubted there were many women like her. Hell, he hoped not. "Well," she said, smiling all over the place at the compliment, "I've talked enough about me. Now I want to hear about you. Alan tells me the 2 of you went to law school together, and that, as a government attorney, you're in charge of making sure the great state of California stays on a straight and narrow path." She rested her chin in her hands.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?